This is the Neurosurgery Podcast.
Welcome back to the Neurosurgery Podcast. Again, I'm very disappointed JP's not with us today. We usually do Memorial Day together. It's a great and important holiday. But I am also very lucky to be joined by some very nice folks from Return to Duty. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Tim, why don't you go first?
Sure, thanks, Doc. Tim Fazekas, one of the co-founders of Return to Duty. I'm a former Marine infantry guy, and then I'm a retired fire officer.
Jared?
I'm Shewey. I'm a Green Beret medic, former Special Forces weapons sergeant. I'm still currently in the reserves and as an instructor at our teaching facility.
And Rachelle?
Rachelle Yusufbekov, biomedical engineer by training and a big supporter all things data for Return to Duty.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for spending Memorial Day with me for just about 30 minutes. I want to thank you all for your service and thank all the first responders, servicemen and women out there. We know that there's 3 active wars going on right now and a lot of other conflicts around the world and globe. So my hat's off to all of them. I'm sure our hearts and minds are with them today. But let's talk about Return to Duty a bit. Tim, why don't you kick us off by telling our audience what is Return to Duty? What is its purpose? What are you guys doing?
So thank you, Doc. Return to Duty is a 501c3. It's a veteran service organization that our mission is to help injured soft personnel, so special operation personnel, either retired or still active, get the best in-class spine care available.
Fantastic. And how long you guys been around for?
So I think 2022 is when we founded it. So David Simons and myself and Kevin Rash founded it. David, Kevin, and myself had met previously when we were working in a different company. David and myself were both instructors, contract instructors teaching tactical combat casualty care. And Kevin, he was an Air Force he was actually a chaplain, but he was involved in human performance and med tech aspect of it. 3 years later, we were still friends, and we came up with the idea to start Return to Duty because David and myself had transitioned from working as medics to working as clinical specialists for a spine company that their main focus was on minimally invasive and motion preserving procedures. So
That's fantastic. And we've had David on before, I think a couple years ago when we first met. But Jared, you actually have been in the operating room with us, and tell us about what's the relationship between neurosurgery and RTD.
The relationship from neurosurgery and RTD, I think Dr. Wang, you and Dr. Gardaki and Dr. Hofstetter were some of the first surgeons we approached after starting this. Mainly because, we worked with you, we saw your work, we saw kind of the future of spine surgery, and the fact that there are so many options out there that people don't understand. They don't know what they don't know. Traditionally, we all kind of advise people to put off getting spine surgery until they couldn't take it anymore. And now we see there's so many options. Every one of the spine surgeons that we've worked with or approached, whether they've performed surgery on one of our guys or not, are more than happy to, I would say, bend over backwards to help us out, whether it's getting a patient in a little ahead of schedule or even right around the holidays. Dr. Derman squeezed somebody in, I think the day after Christmas a couple years ago, at least for a consult. So it's been a great relationship, and everyone has been extremely helpful.
Yeah, shout out to Ray Gardaki at Vanderbilt, Peter Derman at Texas Back, and Christoph, one of our former fellows at University of Washington, Seattle. Fantastic guys. You guys have been a great sort of ambassador between these two worlds, the medical world and the military world. But, a lot of folks, they don't really understand why there's even a need, right? And maybe, Rachelle, can you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in terms of collecting data, the studies that are going on? Is there really a need for all this?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of times the low impact routine exposure through training and not just on the front lines of combat is a bit overlooked. So when you really think about the conditions that our servicemen and women are subjected to, even before they may reach the front lines, no one is coming out of those conditions without some back pain or a spine injury. So being able to bridge that gap to ensure they have access to care that can extend their desires to serve and get them back into a state of readiness, both for, in the military service and on the home front, is just so important.
Yeah, and do you have data on that you can share with our audience? Because
Oh
I
yeah.
assume there's lots of injuries, right?
Absolutely. We actually did a survey of special operators, over 100 respondents we received. And of that, we found that over 88% were actually hiding an injury that resulted in back pain or spinal pathology. And so what we found is that although the prevalence is very much there, the culture and the environment is one where we're kind of taught to hide and protect ourselves, to sacrifice our own perhaps physical limitations, so then that way we continue to move forward with the activities that we're just expected to do. So one thing is the education gap, I think, too, on what types of procedures are really available with the most minimal impact. So rather than going in and having to get a 3-level fusion, maybe a microdiscectomy or some access through endoscopic exposures to be able to preserve the anatomy and extend really the ability of the anatomy to be reassessed at a later time in a more invasive way, if something were to progress, is something that we're really seeing a gap between the treatment care pathways with the VA DoD doctors and then what we have on the industry side that we've just become more accustomed to.
Well, 88%. So, and we're talking about a young group of men and women, right? These folks are usually not that old, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know there's a 2024 systemic review that actually looked at around 360,000 military personnel and reported highly variable 1 year lower back pain prevalence too, depending on service population. So when we're looking across different arms of service, there are some very clear disparities. I think it was close to 82% in the Army sample were very highly prevalent to be subjected to this, of course, because of the nature of their training, and Air Force. So reaching up to 50% of Air Force when we think about the forces that they undergo with just the nature of flight and extreme conditions. So it's good to note that as well.
Wow, Tim, maybe you can. I mean, you served in the Marine Corps, right? You can give us some insight. I mean, I'm imagining like jumping out airplanes, parachute jumping, all the training, the heavy packs, the combat. What do you think is really the big factor in terms of the high prevalence?
Oh, repetitive injuries just from carrying, 80, 90 pound rucksacks all the times. We've had patients that they just have like it just accelerates degenerative conditions to patients that have fallen off obstacle courses, parachuting accidents, motor vehicle accidents. You're just at risk of so many different types of injuries while serving in the military, not even just in combat, but just the training itself. Um, I served during peacetime, and then we probably had 20-30% of the people that I served with in my small group that ended up having some type of medical problem that, they had to change jobs or leave the service for.
And there are some specific requirements in terms of what surgeries folks can undergo given their role in the military, right? Like I'm thinking back to some of the jet fighter pilots I've taken care of. Like they cannot have more than one level fused, or they need disc replacements or something. Are there? Do you know the parameters on that? It's very interesting to me, and they're different in different branches of the military as well, right?
It's not unified. It's each service. So the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, they're going to have different requirements, and they're constantly evolving. A number of the neurosurgeons that we're working with now, even going back 20 years ago, they've kind of expressed some, difficulty in getting the higher command to see things their way. So whether it's for a waiver or changing the policy itself. So there's very few neurosurgeons or orthospine surgeons within the military. So the majority of like the admirals and generals, they come from say a family practice background or emergency medicine background. Um, so it's just them being able to articulate and get policy change, which in the government it's a slow process. So that's something we're trying to help with and work with both current and former military docs now.
Yeah, I want to come back to that issue of like the doctors that work inside the VA and military health system. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask Jared his perspective on this because I'm sure he has an opinion. Like, what struck me every time I've seen someone in the military is their strong desire to return to their previous role. Like we take care of lots of folks that are in other professions. And frequently the conversation devolves into, well, I really don't want to work anymore. And can you fill out the disability paperwork? But I've not found that to be the case by and large for folks in the U.S. Military. It just strikes me as a cultural difference.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And just like the survey information that Rochelle talked about, I was not surprised whatsoever when 80% came back saying they were essentially hiding or masking injuries to stay in their current role. Um, I think some of it is maybe a mentality thing, especially given the time frame that we are in and we're in, with the wars and it being, a volunteer army. I mean, the other part of it is the the relationships you build, and to a certain extent, depending on what your job is, the things you get to do. I mean, I miss being on a team, but I don't necessarily miss the army, so to speak. So I mean, you get at times you get to go and do really fun and unique things with some of your closest friends, and then also just there is like a sense of duty. I know so many guys, whether they're a pilot or whether they're Green Beret, Navy SEAL, Marine infantrymen, that they don't want to let their buddies down at their unit. So they hide things. They just basically suck it up, so to speak, to continue to go on a deployment or a training cycle or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, the name of your organization kind of sets it all, right? It's return to duty. It's getting people better so they can go back to what they were doing before, right?
Absolutely, and that is basically a kind of a military medical term as well, like getting cleared to return to duty, and that's where that name comes from.
Wow. So Rochelle, let's go a little deeper into the data, into the weeds here. So tell us more. You said 88% of 100 respondents had some sort of, it was spine injury, was it?
Yes, back pain or spine injury, and a few other interesting statistics, excuse me, that we found is that really the basic combat training injuries are really commonly overuse injuries, strains, sprains, stresses, and fractures. And what that really equates to is the deterioration of the individual before they even get out to the front line. So then, when you think about the holistic journey of the patient, of the person, it's really those compounded repeated exposures over time. And then where do you go? What do? You end up becoming subject to, of course, your first line of, I'll say, return to duty readiness assessment are the care pathways within the military system. But unfortunately, as great as the VA and DoD physicians are, sometimes they may not have the training resources with some of the more cutting edge anatomy preserving, motion preservation techniques that we have now been able to develop from the industry side. So it really becomes a whole compendium of factors that go into the environment that we're in as a whole, and that's where all of those readiness assessments from training to the front end and beyond really are become so important.
Yeah, that's such an important point. So, Tim, let's come back to that. Like, I've known lots of folks that have been docs in the military, a lot of neurosurgeons. I think there's only a handful, maybe like it's not even double digits that are currently active. And then, of course, folks that work in the VA system, which is a slightly different system. For our listeners who don't understand, the veteran system is for folks who've essentially left or retired the military. Folks in the military do have health insurance. It's usually, is it still TRICARE? I think it's still TRICARE,
Yes.
right? But there are physicians that are inside the military that are officers, and they're usually the first ones to see most folks if they're available. And there being so few neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons, oftentimes, as you said, a general medical officer or someone along those lines are going to take care of them. So, Tim, is there an issue with culture? Because Rochelle brought up training. I think it's part of it. It's also maybe the short duration of time they serve in the military, meaning the neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons, right? I mean, what are your insights on this? You've gotten care inside the system.
So what I've seen is, depending upon if you're an active duty surgeon in the military, where you do your residency often depends on what you're exposed to. Once you're done with your residency, there's very limited opportunity for education. In part, it's because the government doesn't want to allow industry to sponsor training because they view it as a violation, Sunshine Act, in-kind contributions. So it's very difficult. So the workaround is to go through an alumni association or a nonprofit such as Return to Duty. So that's something we want to be able to do, like set up labs sponsored by industry at military treatment facilities to provide, say, whether it's training on enabling tech, endoscopic procedures, um, uh, artificial disc replacements. So I'll say out of the military, there's 40 plus major military treatment facilities, so like hospital level. And I think there's 10 or 12 of them that can do complex spine. Within the VA, there's about 172 or so VA medical centers, and about 50 of them are able to do complex spine. So like you work at one down in Miami and you're affiliated through the school there, but 100 other VAs that they don't have that ability. So what they do, and the same thing with the other 30 something MTFs, is they use community-based care. So then that's just a local spine surgeon, whether he's ortho, spine, or neuro, that signs up to either get paid by the VA or get paid by TRICARE. And then sometimes the government gives up control over what's going to be best for the patient then. We have one example at AANS. I was speaking to Dr. Carroll, who's a recently retired naval surgeon. So he had a patient that they med boarded. She was an F-35 pilot, ended up needing a cervical procedure. They fused her, which then excluded her from being able to, they fused her into community-based care. So she had to transition from a high-performance fighter to flying a cargo plane, which, I mean, I could imagine, like in the Top Gun movie, they're talking about that's going to be Maverick's job, and that's a fate almost worse than death for a fighter pilot. And it's because they don't have data on whether a fusion is safe for an ejection seat, and the cargo planes don't have ejection seats. So any of the fighter planes, you have to be able to eject and then not snap your neck and die. So I don't think, from my conversation with the doc, is they may not have done the same procedure if they had done it in-house, but based upon where this pilot was stationed, there wasn't a military physician. So then the military evaluated her after the situation. They couldn't grant the waiver, and then she had to reclassify. She still maintained pilot status, but not the type of plane that she had signed up to fly.
Wow, that's such a telling anecdote and story. I don't want to call it an anecdote. It's someone's life, but
Yeah.
it's such an important story. People don't understand the role these folks play. And a shout out to our former grads who are military. Stacy Quintero Wolf, Navy. She's now the chair at Wake Forest. Brian Hood, who's out in Texas. I think he was Air Force. Andrew Middleton, I just spoke to him from the Navy. He's in Georgia. And Slava Makler, Navy, who is hopefully going back to Orlando. But the thing that strikes me about the four folks we've trained is they go into the military and they're there during the early part of the career by definition, right after training, and that's also kind of like their board collection period. And so none of them stayed in more than I think 5 years. And so I feel like by the time you get really good, like I'm thinking about like Peter Durman or Ray Gardaki, they're all like 10 years out by the time you get really good at these sophisticated procedures. And by then they're out of the military system and there's a new batch of folks coming in, right? You don't have those folks who stay in the military for like 30 years anymore who are military docs. You just don't see it anymore. And I guess that's where I want to come back to Jared, which is, what is RTD doing in terms of like getting this message out? I know you guys speak to the high brass of all the armed forces and have a little bit of their very limited attention. Like, what's the messaging on this? How do we change the system so folks don't have to, like the story that Tim just told, folks don't have to be subjected to more limited options in terms of surgical care?
Yeah, there's a few different approaches to this. I mean, we've spoken to quite a few higher ups. That's going more along, like you said, changing the system, which is very hard to do and takes a long time if you're even able to do it. One of the options, a good one in Florida is we're partnered with the CARE Coalition that's part of US SOCOM. So they know when they have someone come back with a back injury, they reach out to us right away. And fortunately, we have a surgeon that's fairly close by, Saeed Sadramelli there in Orlando. And he's done a great job. The other one is just, I would say, primary care education. The doctors at the unit level, which, like Tim said, they may not have a combat specialty or surgical specialty, but they're the unit surgeon. A lot of them are emergency medicine. family practice, that sort of thing. Having them be knowledgeable on one, our organization, and two, just that there are more options out there in spine care than probably what they're aware of. And kind of, I hate to say, being able to kind of head things off at the pass, but start steering the conversation and the treatment early on before someone gets sucked into the like just the standard care approach. And that can be a challenge at times. Like Tim said, if a military treatment facility does not have the specialty option, they'll reach out into the community. And fortunately, I think it's been fairly easy for us to kind of steer that to the best type of care if there's a surgeon in that state. But if you're on active duty, you have TRICARE Prime, which I know can be a little more challenging to go and give a referral out of state versus in state. Fortunately, for most of at least the bases where there's special operations stationed, we have a surgeon that we've worked with and we trust, typically in that state. For people in the reserves and the National Guard and the VA, that sort of thing, I believe the insurance systems are a little bit easier to try and get out of state referrals, and they can kind of pick and choose. But it really comes down to patient education right off the bat when they start seeking treatment.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think the flip side, of course, is provider education, right? So, Rachelle, you've been working with a lot of the medical societies, certainly surgical ones, in particular spine. Do you want to tell us a little about what's been going on? Your work with AANS and ESMIS and ISAS.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I know more recently, too, we've been cultivating very strong community partnerships with other groups as well as a National Spine Health Foundation. And so, what we really have observed, right, is that these spine injuries sit at the intersection of really readiness, chronic pain, mental health, deployability, and the long term veteran outcome. So, by cultivating the community, of course, from the organizations, the societies that are already in place, we're able to help, hopefully, return to duty, bridge the gap between some of those acute care challenges that maybe the DoD VA physicians are just stressed by given the environment that they work within, and be able to help through that rehabilitation performance recovery pathway, with the long-term goal of eventually being able to drive policy refinement collectively with the society communities, because there's just truly that need for improvements from treatment, functional recovery, and then ultimately that durable return to mission, whether that mission is the return to duty if they're still enlisted, or return to work or family, for those that may have been transitioned out of service.
Wow, that's a great message. So as we draw to a close, I want to let Tim and Jared sort of have a shout out, maybe Tim to fellow Marines out there. I'm surprised that our podcast does have a fairly decent listening base that's in the military, and episodes like this tend to get out there more to that audience. Maybe a message out to folks who are suffering from injuries. Fellow Marines, Tim, do you have anything to say to those folks out there? There are lots of them, obviously, as your study showed.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the same boat trying to hide stuff. It just makes it worse. I think that no one's out there to kick you out or make you do something you don't want to do. But I think the earlier you go and seek help, the better it's going to be. Because eventually you go down this pathway that you're in so much pain and you start self-medicating, and it changes how you interact with your family and those around you. That's I can take a lot of pain myself, but then I was causing suffering for my family, which is something I feel really bad about. And I wish I had reached out for help earlier.
Well, yeah, that's an important. Thank you for your honest and open message. That's an important message. Not easy to deliver. How about you, Jared? For folks in the Army, right? Army.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean basically the same thing that Tim said. And with people we spoke about earlier, not wanting to be a liability and kind of hiding and masking these injuries and this pain, you can easily become a liability because of that. Whether you're not physically able to do something, your mental focus is not there, self-medicating, anything. Um, I just want people to know that there are options out there besides just what you're typically told. Because I think all of us have heard horror stories, whether it's say not a bad outcome, but the invasiveness of spine surgery and what it does to your life and your career. And that also you need to be your own advocate. Even though you're in the military, you have options and you have avenues to pursue as opposed to just what you're told. And I think that's a big one. If you're not your own advocate, typically no one else will be.
Yeah, that's a great message. Rachelle, why don't you take us home? Tell us, for folks who are listening, maybe they want to learn more, maybe they want to give to your organization, maybe they want to volunteer, or they just want to hear more about it. How do they get a hold of you guys?
Absolutely. No, we encourage everyone to visit returntoduty.us. That is our website. On the website, you'll be able to access help if you're seeking resources or support for your back pain or spine injury, as well as stay connected. So we do have an interim newsletter that goes out. No spam, but if you do fill that out, it'll allow us to stay connected and keep you in the loop of volunteer opportunities as well as provider opportunities. So we look forward to hearing from anyone who may be interested in participating.
Well, thank you guys for joining us on Memorial Day. I consider it one of the most important holidays in this country. Shout out to all the folks and their families that are serving or have served, and look forward to seeing you guys back at the next meeting, hopefully AANS in Washington D.C. 2027.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Wang.
Bye bye.